Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another special episode of Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. Tonight, I have a very special guest who is going to be speaking about family law, conflict and conflict resolution, together with how to manage human emotions. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Advocate Mabel Slabbert. Mabel Slabbert is a graduate of the then Rao University, where she got a BA Law and a BA Honours in Philosophy, which followed by an LLB degree, which brought her into contact with the potential of human behavior. So we are very pleased to have Advocate Mabel Slabbert. Mabel, good evening and welcome to Legal Ease.
Thank you, Ashraf. Thank you very much. Lovely being here.
Thank you. Mabel, what in terms of family law, especially where there's conflict, and it's usually injected and fraught with difficulties. We have a lot of emotions involved, and you've done a lot of cases on this in this topic, basically. Now, I know that you specialize in training people to deal with emotion and the very difficult business of managing stress in these difficult situations. What, if anything, can we start with as a starter? Where would we start with human emotions? I understand that there's something like 4,800 human traits. That's correct, yes. So what would you be able to tell us with regard to human emotions? Let's say the human traits.
Okay, Ashraf, what I want to start off by saying is that there are 4,600 plus or minus human traits. The magnificence of this is that we all have all 4,600 human traits, which means that we are both evil, we're both nice, we're both sinners, saints. We can kill somebody, we can save somebody. We all have those traits embedded in us. And the magnificence of the human mind is to look at that, to see it in yourself as you see in others, and then we can deal with the human emotion.
So you've mentioned a few of these human traits, and I know that you've been involved in a very high-profile murder that has been very well publicized on TV. Now, if you take a human being, I mean, it's astonishing to actually find such a huge amount of 4,600. I mean, one usually only thinks of 10 or 12, let's say, emotional strains: anger, like you say, joy, happiness, anger. So, I mean, that sounds very, very complex and very, very interesting. If you care, would you be able to give us an interesting case study that you've done in this, just to get the viewers involved in what the topic is and why is it relevant to law, more especially because we're dealing with family law, conflict and resolution. So there's the whole emotional management within the legal framework. What kind of human traits would you say are the most prevalent?
Ashraf, that really depends on the case that's presented to me at the time. But if I have to think of what I did today, I dealt with a lady that caught her husband cheating. So it's very raw emotions that we deal with. And then we get the client to have a balanced state of mind. Because if you have got a balanced state of mind, what you actually do is you free the brain up to think of other avenues where you can get a resource to help you by yourself. So the trick lies in finding the exact emotion that the client has that's sitting in front of you, and helping the client to see that that emotion can be dealt with and can be used to her advantage in this situation.
So what you're saying is very, very important, because if the emotions are not in check, and let's say you're a witness in a matter, and you're actually under cross-examination and you're in the box, or you're the plaintiff or the complainant in a let's say in a criminal case, and you're extremely emotional. Let's say you're a victim of a violent crime, armed robbery, or something of that nature, and your emotions are not in check. What you're actually suggesting is that you would train the person to manage their emotions so that they could manage the process properly.
That's correct, Ashraf. If I could just take it a few steps back, I always start by saying God created the universe in a balance. He created day and night, winter and summer. And as we're sitting here tonight, it's winter. At this exact moment in time, it would be summer elsewhere in the world. So we can see throughout the entire universe that there's always balance. And when there's balance, you can use all your senses to look for other avenues to resolve the problem at hand. Now, if you're emotionally unstable whilst dealing with a problem, your mind can't focus on anything else. Your mind can't help you to see any other avenue. So it is my job to get my client to be emotionally stable, to see both sides, the good and the bad, and then only can we deal with the issue at hand, such as, for instance, the affair.
Just a reminder to our viewers, our lines are open and you are invited to call in, and the number as usual is 011 086 7701/2 or 3. I'll repeat that number, and the number is on the screen. Mabel, you referred just now to a case where I think it's in a marriage or domestic relationship where one party had to deal with the emotion of finding infidelity. Now, typically, how would you train such a person to deal with this, and why is it important that they are able to deal with this, especially within the realm of our topic, which is family law and conflicts and resolutions? So my question is, how would you what skills will you equip that let's say the wronged party with?
If we go back to the 4,600 traits, the reason why we look at that is so that we can get to a point where we can determine the person, each human, has got a set of values or top priorities. And whatever we do or don't do, in our minds, we're acting according to the set of top priorities. So whether we do something good or bad, we, in our own perception, are valuing ourselves according to our top values, top priorities. So even if we do something that we don't like doing, like for instance, being in a fight with your children or with your spouse, you are being led by what you think is their top priorities and yours. So to start off with, you would have to find out what the person's top priorities and top values are. And that is like your fingerprint. Each of us, we have got our own set of top priorities. So there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad in that. It belongs to you. And whatever your actions or inactions would be, that is going to be driven by your top values.
So let's take it away from that topic and talk about victims of crime. You mentioned to me before the show that recently you've been dealing with a lot of patients or clients from the Lenasia area, which seems to be under some kind of great crime wave. Now, you said to me that an entire family was affected by a particular incident. Now, that seems to be managing various people. Just give me walk through a typical example of where you would start, what you would look for, and what the client can expect.
What happened in this instance, Ashraf, a family were having the evening meal together, and gunmen burst into their property in Lenasia and held up the entire family. There were mothers and children, and they took the father away. So what I had to deal with was, first of all, the father was exceptionally disturbed by all of this. And then there was a little brave boy that eventually had been affected by all of this. So you start off by seeing the people one at a time, by finding out what their values are, their top priorities, because that is what regulates each person. So I spoke to about 23 of the people, especially the father and, as I said, the young boy. And after finding out what their values were, we put them together, and then we started the very difficult and easy process of finding the benefits of the situation where the gunmen held them up. Now, people would think it's complete madness to say that there's a benefit to being held up, but there is. So the problem lies in this, is that you have to find it, because there's absolutely never a stressing without a blessing. And if you can see the blessings in that situation, you will free yourself up. You will be able to be thankful to God for what He's put on your way, not in your way. And you would be able to live a wonderful life after the incident. Because so often people have incidents and they refuse to live after that.
Yes.
So my job is to get people to see the blessing and to live a better life after the incident.
So it appears to me that this requires certain specialized steps or skills to be taken. I think in the case that you've just mentioned, am I correct in understanding that you put the child and the father together in one room, or was it a separate?
First, it's a separate interview that I have, because often when you deal with a situation like that, a person could feel that there's some intimate details that they would rather want to discuss just with me. And if we get to that, then only can we put the father and the son, or the father and the crowd together. So that's exactly how we proceeded in helping this lovely family to resolve this issue. And in the end, I have to say, they were all very grateful that the incident actually happened.
So I'm just curious, what good, as you said, you'd find it very strange. What good could possibly come from being a victim of an armed robbery?
Well, first of all, the family were so grateful that they had each other. They started being grateful for their lives, even if there were some grannies and they weren't young anymore. The father felt as if though he was so in control of the whole family, because they took him away, and he was the one that said he's going to save the family. And then there was the little boy who found out that he was just as brave as his superhero. So for me, that was magnificent to find out that there's a young boy, he was only 6 or 7 years old, that in that instance, when they took the father away, he started protecting the entire family. So they all honored him for doing that. And while he was doing that, his little sister was just praying. And she said that she found God within her heart at that time. So those were just some of the blessings.
And on that very, very interesting point, unfortunately, we'll have to take a very short commercial break. We'll be back after the break. Please stay tuned. Thank you, and welcome back to the second half of Legal Ease. My very special guest tonight is Advocate Mabel Slabbert, who is also an expert in human behavior. Mabel, just before the break, we were talking about something extremely interesting. But if I may take you back to the situation that most people face in law, where you have to deal with conflict resolution, let's say in our area, in our family law, and divorce is probably the most traumatic part of having to deal with conflict resolution, because there is the family advocate that will step in when there are minor children involved. If there's no minor children, the family advocate doesn't have to give a report as to who the better custodial parent is or what their recommendations are. Now, I'm pretty certain that a lot of people do not know how to conduct themselves when they go for these interviews. And you made the important point earlier on that one has to manage the emotional side so that you could deal with the facts. Now, what advice or what steps would you take your client through in order to prepare them?
Ashraf, before you can look at a fact, you need to have the emotional situation in your mind cleared. So what I do is I get my clients to have their emotions under control, because if your emotion is under control, then you can actually look at the facts. If you had to have a picture of the brain looking down onto the brain, there's an expression called the brain is, if there's a lot of space-time in the brain can't think of the facts that it's been presented with. That happens when our emotions is at such a level that you can't think of anything else. So you're just thinking about the emotion. I'm so sad, I'm so depressed, I'm so devastated. What am I going to do? Where am I going to find finances to get me through this? How am I going to raise my children? Or where am I going to get a new wife? Where am I going to get a new husband? If we get the emotions cleared, you will actually be able to open both your eyes and look at all the facts that's been presented to you. And then only will you be able to go into a situation where you are calm and you can address the situation at hand.
Now, Mabel, that sounds easier said than done. I mean, if I just take again the example of the high-profile case that we've been watching on TV, and a specialist psychologist came on to say that there were deep emotional issues here about anger management, etc. What you're really saying to me is that you have the mechanisms of dealing with that. Take me a little bit deeper, just unpack that. What would you look for, and how would your client be able to be taken away, let's say, from the emotive state and back into the state in dealing with the facts in a calm, rational manner?
Okay, so the first step is to identify, because as in death, you can't say when somebody died, you can't say, I miss the person. There's something specific that you're going to miss about the person. So if we can get specific and, for instance, say, I'm going to miss his laughter.
Right.
You can then start looking for the laughter in other people and find, because nothing's ever missing. So the same in this, in a situation where there's anger, for instance, you have to pinpoint the exact emotion. Once you've pinpointed the exact emotion, then the work starts. Then you can actually look at why. What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? Why am I doing this? And once you realize that a specific emotion is there to teach you something, is there to make you look at something else, and no emotion, we must always remember, it's got both sides. It will have a benefit and a drawback to it. So if you get very angry, for instance, there'll be a benefit and a drawback to getting very angry. The same with sadness. That's why people stay in a state of depression, is because it gives them certain benefits. And people would automatically say there's absolutely no benefit in being depressed. Yes, there would be a benefit if you start looking at it. So this is not an easy exercise. You can't do it, for instance, whilst just driving in the car, listening to the music. You have to take some time off and do the exercise. Sit with yourself and find why this emotion is such a trigger point in your life at this specific time.
I'll just pause to mention that the lines are open en u is welkom ook in Afrikaans in te skakel. Advocate Mabel Slabbert is saam met ons vanaand. And the numbers are 011-086-7701/2 or 3. Now, let's take the typical example of a divorce. That's usually an area where emotions seem to override all reason. And again, you pointed out 4,600 traits. What other traits would you look for to try and assess the kind of client you're dealing with in order to assist them? So there are emotional traits, but what other traits would you look for?
Ashraf, I think the most difficult thing when dealing with divorce is finding out what the reason for the divorce is. One of the reasons could, for instance, be infidelity, as you said.
Yeah.
And then to sit with a client and to explain to a client that we are both the creator of our own lives. It's a very hard thing to accept that you created the life you've got. You created the situation where your husband is having an affair, for instance.
No, but that now sounds like you know, they would say you're blaming the victim, but what you're really saying is you're dealing with the emotional side of what triggered the infidelity. So you're
Yes.
trying to find a reason within, let's say, the victim now.
Okay.
And then to assist the victim to come out of the
That emotional
Yes.
state. So usually in a case where there's infidelity and you look at the victim, let's call it the woman, for instance, you will see that the woman is unempowered in some areas of her life. So there are 7 areas of life. And if we look at these areas, your family, your social, your vocational, your spiritual, your mental, if you look at those stages of your life, you'll see that at least 3 out of the 7 phases or stages of her life she's unempowered in. So to bring her to see that she's unempowered, for instance, in a financial situation, or that she's unempowered in her vocation, or she's unempowered in her mental state, therein lies the power for her if she acknowledges and if she can see that there is power in looking at your dispower. So that in itself is a process, but will help her eventually, and I say eventually because it depends on how the victim, call her that, is prepared to work with me and to work with herself to get her out of that state of being the victim.
So if I understand, let's take the typical example, the woman feels, okay, I can't afford to get divorced because I won't have the income to support myself or the lifestyle. She might live in a very big home and have all of that, but she might not have the wherewithal to then maintain a lifestyle. So she doesn't then have the courage to leave a meaningless relationship. What you're saying is you'll be able to help her to overcome the fear of loss of that lifestyle. You have the skills to do that.
Yes, I've got the skills to do that, but I do that with the client. So it's not me being magnificent having the skills. I teach my clients the skills so that when they leave my office, they are empowered and they have the tools to go and live their lives. Just to quickly touch on women saying, and there's the statistics show that women fear divorce because they fear the fact that they won't be able to sustain their lifestyle. It's so sad that so many women actually live like that, that they would sell their souls just to have money. But if they are empowered in themselves, they will be able to leave that relationship or stay in it with a different view and happily ever after.
Now, Mabel, another very difficult question, that of the recent changes to the Civil Marriages Act. The position previously for the last 300 years was that Muslim marriages were not recognized.
Correct.
Per se. In the last month, the Department of Home Affairs has rolled out 100 trained imams that are also marriage officers. The effect of that training and rolling out, I think it started in the pilot project in Cape Town and KwaZulu-Natal, means that Muslim couples may now enter into a marriage in front of a designated marriage officer and have that marriage registered in the Civil Marriages Act. I'll come back to that point. We have a caller. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. You just spoke to me now. You were going to put me through to Ashraf.
You're on air. Please go ahead.
Okay. Now, I just need to say that I actually, 3 months back, I was just finished work, and then I met this guy. I met a guy at this exhaust place where I fix my exhaust. And then he said that he does spray painting and panel beating and stuff. I just finished work because the doctor medically boarded me for depression, so permanently. So then I got chatted with him, and I also told him that I need a bucky because I need to do some business. Then he gave me his details and everything. He then called me and says, I got a bucky at the auction. You need 10 grand, and it's like a bargain. You need to put the money in my account. Then what I do, I speak to him, and he says, you need to do it immediately. And I go to the bank and I do the transfer. See, it doesn't work. Then he meets up with me on the Saturday morning and he wants money cash. And then I say to him, no, I'm not going to give it cash. I'll put it in your bank account. So I put the 10 grand in his bank account. And then he says, you can also put the money for the spray and stuff. So I do that. And then 3 months later, he never ever came with the bucky. He just refuses to pay my money. When I call him, then he says, if you're going to be rude now, then I'll just put the phone down. I don't know him, really. I know that I was very, very stupid to actually put the money in his account and to give something, because he even brought papers, and he brought, he was very convincing. My whole family was there when he did it. So, I don't know what, the police are so slow. They're not, it's taking months for them to get his address at the bank. He doesn't want to pay me. I don't know how I just got this guy's contact number, and I don't know what to do about it, because it was my Provident Fund money. I did work like 11 years, and for him to just think he can get away, he says that he paid his debt apparently with my money. So I didn't even know him, and I just had a baby. At the time when I met him, my baby was months old.
If I may just, I think what you're asking me is how you can get your money back, and the amount that you're claiming is less than 15,000. Is that correct?
The police is not doing anything really.
I understand. Look, let's just deal with the civil side of it. So you had a contract where you paid a certain person money and he hasn't delivered the bucky or the goods. Now, your first call of action would be to go to the magistrate's court. Now, the magistrate's court has a division called the Small Claims Court. The clerk of the Small Claims Court, because the amount is less than 15,000, would allow you to issue a letter of demand in terms of the Small Claims Court Act. The letter of demand is sent via registered mail to the person that's taken your money, demanding repayment of your money. Alternatively, delivery up of the bucky. Now, in the event after 14 days that they fail, you go back to the clerk of the Small Claims Court, and they will assist you with issuing of a summons. Now, amazingly, that summons is sent to him, but it's the shortest, quickest, cheapest route to get your money back. In fact, you will be representing yourself in these proceedings, so there's no attorneys involved for either side, and you will appear before the Commissioner of the Small Claims Court on the day of the hearing, and you will put together the evidence that you have before the Commissioner, including the witnesses that you had that witnessed this transaction and his subsequent breach of promise. So if you have SMSs that you've sent him, etc., you can put that as proof of the evidence before the Commissioner. Then the Commissioner will make a finding on the facts and then direct if there's going to be a judgment against this man. And let's say there's a judgment against him and he doesn't pay. Then the sheriff is authorized, after you go back to the clerk of the Small Claims Court, is authorized to go and fetch his belongings in order for you to sell to satisfy the debt or the judgment that he owes against you. So this is a civil claim, and the police itself won't get involved. I hope that
Listen to me, with all due respect, he put the police on a wild goose chase, eh? With all due respect, he did put the police on a wild goose. He said that they can meet him.
Yes, but you don't understand. In terms of the law, this is not a crime. This is a breach of contract. This is not. You can't prove theft, so the police are not really going to investigate a civil case. A civil case is dealt with in civil courts, and a criminal case is dealt with in criminal courts.
No, but I didn't have a contract. I never signed anything.
A verbal contract for the purchase of a bucky and payment of money is a binding contract.
I paid it into his bank account.
That's your proof, and that's what you'll put.
I paid it into his bank account for Opal course a bucky.
Yes, and that's your proof, and that's what you'll put before the Commissioner.
Because now he's very rude. He's just not wanting to pay my money.
Well, these are the steps you should take to satisfy yourself that you're going to be able to recover this. And if you don't take these steps within 3 years, then your claim has prescribed and you can't do anything.
And I'm single, so...
Well, the other option is that you could approach the law clinics at the various universities. Every university has a law clinic, and that law clinic has got trained young lawyers under the supervision of a full-time lawyer to assist you to recover your money.
I just think he's a damn thief, man.
Thank you for your call. Mabel, we were just talking about the effect of the marriages before these marriage officers. So in effect, what it really means is that you are able now to have your name and that of your spouse listed in terms of the Civil Marriages Act. Now, previously, when you bought a property and you were married in Islam, according to Islamic law or nikah, then they would reflect you as unmarried. So that now changes. It says you are married, and in the absence of an antenuptial contract, that marriage will be registered as a marriage in community of property. So it's up to the marriage, the partners to indicate to the marriage officer that they're going to marry by antenuptial contract, which really means what is their estate belongs to them and that of the husband belongs to him. Now, with regard to dispute resolution and conflicts in second, where there's a second wife, and the law hasn't made any provision for this, but what can you, that must be a fairly emotional state for all the parties involved.
That's correct. So are you referring to polygamy, or are you referring to a remarriage after?
No, I'm talking about people in polygamous marriages right now.
Ashraf, if you had to look at talaq, it says that the wives have to get along. So they have to love one another. And in that, saying that, I think as a woman...
Sorry, you said in talaq. You meant...
In the Islamic law.
Yes.
It says that the wives should get along. They should love one another. And I think being a woman, it would be very difficult for me. But in saying that, you can empower both spouses so that they both stand in their own right and have both of their own values and top priorities vested in their marriage so that the marriage could succeed.
Okay, Mabel, I'll ask you to pause there. We have to go for a short break, and we'll be joining you shortly after this break. And welcome back to Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. Tonight, my very special guest is Advocate Mabel Slabbert, who is also a behavioral specialist. You're welcome to call in, and the number, as usual, is 011-086-7701-2 or 3. Now, we were dealing with a very important point of polygamous marriages just before the break, and the wherewithal or the skills that wives would need to deal with this. I think Mabel started with the premise of saying that you have to get on with each other. Now, Mabel, again, theoretically that's fine, but practically, how is that?
Well, practically, the wives, they don't have a choice. They just have to get on with one another because there's now another woman. So whether you wife number 1 or 2, you need to deal with the situation in love. And you can only do that if you stand firm on who you are, if you are true to yourself, and if you believe in yourself and what you have got to offer, not only to your husband, but also to the family and the broader family, then you'll be able to cope and deal with another woman in the house and being the wife of your husband.
But Mabel, now you say another woman. I'm doing a matter right now where my client is from the DRC, and he has something like 12 wives. The president of this country has in excess of 4 wives. So that must be quite a balancing act. But it appears to me, Mabel, we have a caller. Caller, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I just want to know something, please.
Yes.
As a Muslim, we get married by nikah, right?
Right.
Now, my husband passed away. I just want to know, does his family have any right to take over any of our assets?
Did your husband leave a will?
He left a will.
And what does the will say?
Everything belongs to us, right? His children, his wife and children.
Right.
But they do not seem to accept the will. They just feel it's their son, brother, and they need to come and possess whatever was his.
Okay. The law in this country is that the will that the deceased left is the will that the master will accept. And in the will, there's a person called the executor.
Correct.
The executor is entrusted with taking the entire assets of the deceased and his estate and distributing it in accordance with the directives of the will. And the master of the high court is the overseer. He's like the ombudsman. He has to be satisfied at the end of the day that the estate was distributed in accordance with the precepts of the will. Now, if the will is rejected for any reason by the master, it has to be, either for fraud or some other reason. But in the absence of any rejection by the master, the will dictate, and the will absolutely rule over every aspect of how that estate will be wound up, unless the heirs decide they're going to split it amongst themselves. But from what I understand, you're saying there's other people that are not in the will that are trying to gain in the estate.
Yes.
That won't be allowed by the master.
Is there, you know how much bad blood it has caused? It has really split the family.
Mabel, how would you deal with the conflicts there? That's an interesting question, caller. Hold on, please.
Well, first of all, the universal rule is the one where the most certainty wins. So I think in that case it would definitely be you, because you are sitting with the will in your hand. So after hearing what Ashraf has said about the master, surely now you should have the certainty that you are right and that the heirs of this estate, they are in the correct position. So by knowing that you have got the right and the law on your side, you can be certain, and in being certain, you will be able to overcome the issues with the extended family or the people wanting to take your assets.
Does that answer your question?
No, I just want to know something.
Yes.
In our community as such, everybody, hears all these little stories. So it makes it very ugly if we go anywhere and I have to hear all these little things, It hurts, man. It really hurts.
Mabel, the caller is saying that she has to deal with hurtful comments. What kind of advice would you be able to give her in terms of your training as a human behavioral specialist? You've already said that she has let's say the high ground, because she's morally correct, because the will stipulated. It's not her saying it, it's the deceased who said, this is what I want done. So she can't be left carrying the burden of what the deceased desired. But she says she still has to deal with societal prosecution.
In society, we would always have people saying things to us, about us. But if you can maybe face society knowing that half of the people will be on your side, saying that you are doing the right thing, and the other half would not, it gives you again the balance we spoke about earlier, just to know that people will always gossip and there would be people supporting you. So what you should do is not look at the people that's gossiping or look at the people that's against you. What you should do is look at the people, or look to the people that are supporting you. And by looking to these people that's supporting you, you'll be able to face the challenges that lie ahead of you.
Mabel, might I be so bold as to put out your email so that the viewer can actually call you or send you an email for further discussion?
Thank
I think.
you.
So it's Mabel Slabbert. So it's Labbert, Mabel's Slabbert at gmail.com. I'll repeat it. MABELLS LABBERT at gmail.com. Thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Mabel, so we were talking about the traditional society in let's say in Africa or in old Europe was multiple marriages, but we have another caller online. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi there.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask something. I don't know if it's on the subject, but I've been divorced for a couple of years now. My daughter stays with her mother, but the circumstances that she stays in is not too, according to me, not too good. She hasn't got a room. She stays in the kitchen. They've got a flat that they share with a couple of people, and everybody smokes, and she's got asthma. And she's just too scared to speak to her mother about staying with me. And yeah, she's got her own room at my house, and she's got her own room. I don't know if you can.
How old is the child?
Advice. She's 10 years old.
10 years old, Mabel?
Yeah.
According to the Children's Act, the new Children's Act, we have to look at the child, the best interest of the child. So my advice would be if the child is capable of forming her own view, she must be heard according to the various conventions that we are bound by in South Africa, as well as our own constitution. So there's definitely a legal recourse that you can have. I would advise you to, as Ashraf said, all the universities in this country, they've got legal aid. So you can, for instance, approach one of them to assist you in changing the parental plan or the court order that you might have, where the child is staying with a mother. So you can approach the court and have this order changed.
But on a practical level, the Supreme Court or the High Court is the upper guardian of all minor children. And if it's made an order previously, that order can be changed if circumstances change. What you're alleging is a danger to the child's health, and certainly that will be one of the factors taken into account. So on a practical level, you will approach the legal aid clinics or an attorney to assist you in going back to court and saying to the court, I want the circumstances changed. The child is unsafe with the mother, and that will trigger an investigation by the Family Advocate's Office, and they will deploy social workers, and they'll interview you, they'll interview the child, as Mabel has said, in terms of the Child Care Act, they'll interview the mother, they'll pay visits to the actual residence, and then they will make a report to the High Court. And then the judge is guided by the contents of that report, and the judge then says, I find that this child, her circumstances, her health is endangered by sleeping in the kitchen with multiple people. There's smoke all around, and you know they can't even smoke near a child, so that is it's a criminal offense in the first place, and therefore I find that the child is better served elsewhere. Please take the steps that are necessary and that Mabel has pointed out to try and win back custody of the child.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, Mabel, back to the topic of multiple marriages. I was of the view that this is something that was natural for many, many years, and especially prevalent in the traditional communities. There's another caller. We'll have to take the caller. Caller, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I wonder if you could help me, please, man. I've got a relative that was married before the whole Islamic marriage, in terms of customary marriage, you know.
Yes.
He was married before the Islamic marriage was recognized, as you guys say. He also passed away before the effective date, which I think, as you said, was last month, isn't it?
Okay, just to put that into context.
Yes.
the new marriages are governed or can be governed by this pilot project where imams are now marriage officers. It doesn't have retrospective effect. That means it doesn't operate before that day. However, people married according to Islamic rites, or let's say nikah as we know it. There's been a definite progression in recognizing the rights of women and heirs. I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of, let's say, judicial recognition for Muslim marriages, especially in the areas of inheritance, maintenance, etc. So it's not like the Muslim marriages can never be recognized, or those that came before the start of the new regime cannot be recognized or will not be recognized. They are recognized, and they are recognized in specific areas, for example, inheritance and maintenance.
Yeah, but my problem is that the marriage, he died intestate. And now, I mean, the liquidation distribution account is being drawn up. Does the spouse get the child share, or is she not recognized as a spouse?
Yeah, well, you see, this is now a double-edged question, because what you're saying on the one hand, that they were married according to Sharia, and then he died without a will. So, for the sake of inheritance, that marriage is recognized. She's a recognized spouse. There's adequate case law on that. It's well-established law now that a spouse to a Muslim marriage is recognized as a spouse.
Yeah, so in other words, she's entitled to her share in terms of interstate succession.
Absolutely,
there's the Interstate Succession Act, and the Interstate Succession Act, especially now, allows Muslim spouses to claim, even though they are married according to Muslim law and not according to the Civil Marriage Act of 1961. So, definitely.
But if the deceased died last year and the estate is still not being wound up,
makes no difference.
It doesn't
still
matter.
apply?
It absolutely does. It absolutely does still apply, and it doesn't matter when he died. So she would definitely be able to get her fair share according to the Act.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mabel, we have a very short time before we wrap up. So we would now starting to talk about a very interesting topic, and that was that the tradition of mankind was that there was more than one spouse. Earlier on we were talking about Abraham, the patriarch of the faiths, and he had 2 wives. Now, you were suggesting that it's a very, very emotional event for the second wife, and I'm suggesting that the natural state was a man had more than one wife, and somehow the women managed, as is evident in African society. But you have some very interesting tips on how to deal with it, and I'll give you a minute to just sum that up.
So to all the women out there who are married or involved in polygamy, I urge you to look at your own power, your own strength, to see where you are strong and powerful and where you can be a strong and powerful woman. Because if you are a strong and powerful woman in any area of life, it will shine through. It will give you the courage to serve your family, your husband, and all the people that's involved in your life.
So Mabel, what you're saying is, in the event that a woman or your client feels ill-equipped to have that introspection and find the strength and the courage and the positives in her own life, you are the person that will be able to assist her to bring that forth so she can still have a meaningful life. So what you're saying, it's not the end of the world if your husband takes a second wife.
No, it's definitely not the end of the world. It will be the end of the world if you're not equipped in your own power. But if you have got the courage to look at yourself and to find your inner strength, then it's going to be a wonderful life.
But what about the husband? Are you not going to equip him with the same kinds of skills to be able to manage the conflicts emanating from 2 women?
Ashraf, I love how you leave the husband out of this equation and look at only the woman. But good luck to the men out there that have to deal with 2 women. I think both your wife and my husband would say that it's hard enough having one partner. So the men have got the exact same issues. They have to stand firm in their own power to make sure that they're the head of the house, to make sure that people know where their strength lies, and if they believe in their own inner strength, they'll be able to be a magnificent father and a spouse.
Mabel, I'm very grateful that you took the time off to join us tonight from your very, very busy schedule. You certainly have been very educational to me. I'm sure the viewers have benefited from your presence here. And if they need to contact you, they can contact the station or the email that I've given out. I take this opportunity for thanking you for being with us here tonight.
Thank you very much. It was lovely. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.